This is not only my saying, but a family saying. It's not something that will be talked about all of the time, but I can see a lot of the decisions that my parents have made in their lifetime being influenced through the lens of it. Do the thing, take the risk, go for it. You don't want to look back and wonder what if. I moved to Ireland without much of a plan 5 years ago. That was a big change. But in some ways, it didn't feel like it. There were parts of me that were nervous, but there was no part of me that doubted it was what I needed to do. I grew up in Atlantic Canada, and like many Canadians, I'm a mixture of so many identities and backgrounds. Dad's side is Scottish. My family name is McKinnon, with the A. My mum's father was from Lebanon, and my mum's mum grew up in Denmark. Dad has great pride in his identity, which made me, from a young age, identify with that part of myself a lot, because it was always something that we talked about. His family was part of the Highland clearings in Scotland, and having studied history at university, he had a depth of understanding that he would simplify, with a dash of humour, so that we could understand it as children. He said the lowlanders, the landowners, could make more money from sheep, so that's why our ancestors were kicked off the Isle of Skye. I had a professor tell me when I was in my undergrad, he thinks it's one of my skills and one of my self-defense techniques, is that I defect heaviness with humour. Another thing that came into my mind is that my mum's father died quite young, when he was in his 60s. My dad has now surpassed his age. I think the way the saying has manifested the most in my parents' life is by a live for today attitude. The thing that stands out the most was that we moved a lot. They weren't afraid of change. I don't think I realised this wasn't the norm until later on in life. But I'd had 6 places that I'd called home before I finished secondary school. Reflecting on this saying, the question of privilege comes into it a lot for me. The thought that it's all going to work out can come from a level of white middle-class privilege. And I've always thought, for me to be bold or daring, I've had a safety net around me, to catch me if it doesn't work. Anytime I've moved or done something different, I always knew. If it no longer felt aligned, or if the choice had run its course, I could go home. But I'm grateful I had it, and don't necessarily want guilt to be the angle of it, but to talk about how we can create networks of support so that other people can experience this too. Parts of this saying still feels very true, but perhaps in a new iteration. When I think about this saying in my youth, it was about moving forward with risk, going to new places and doing new things, sometimes without much of a thought. Earlier, I might have been flippant with my mention of not second-guessing myself when moving to Ireland. I'm sure that if I was transported back to that moment, there would be some feelings of doubt. But I'm proud of how I've been willing to step outside of the norm, been willing to trust myself, and follow through on the things I knew I really wanted to do. When I think about this saying, I think about a tree, because if the earlier phases of my life were like the branches reaching out, wanting to have a wider experience of life, new cultures, new people, new experiences, a literal broadening of the horizons, branches reaching out to take up more space. I feel like I always used to say that in order for them to reach out far enough, I needed to have a strong enough foundation beneath me to hold those branches up. And I feel like the phase of my life that I'm in right now is very much about being brave and creating the roots that I need to hold all of the other things. Today, this saying feels really present in my work. To not be doing is to be complacent. To not be doing is to be hiding from who I actually am, what I really feel like I'm meant to be doing in the world. I work as a coach, and I'm in the process of really trying to back myself to make it a more full-time prospect. I'd like to work as a coach full-time. And I think coming back to this is like asking for what you want. And in this capacity, it's learning to trust that I have value to share. The thing that feels really exciting and scary about my work right now is that I've been doing things very generally. And now I want to work with the critical analysis that I have of the world. And with this, I feel like I'm bearing a part of my heart and my soul to people. And if it's not received, there's no space to retreat to. There is no, oh well, I didn't actually care about that thing. Resistance here comes from a place of vulnerability and a place of fear of failure. And while it's really scary, it's also connected to an aliveness. When I'm coaching, I'm in my element, and I have not a shadow of a doubt it's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. But coming back to that feeling is the tricky part. I'd like to send my absolute thanks to Stephanie for sharing her story with us. This project is ultimately about connection, by getting to know others and getting to know ourselves, by trying to get a little bit more curious. So I would like to invite you, the listeners, to go out into your community and to ask somebody what their favourite saying is, and then ask them questions as to why that is meaningful to them. Stephanie's favourite saying that we heard about here today is, "Fortune favours the brave."